Well, it's not really a surprise to anybody, but yesterday, the Republicans' efforts to fund the government on a stopgap basis, this is something that a lot of establishment Republicans really want to do, it fell apart again. Efforts to pass a Pentagon funding bill fell apart again. A lot of this is due to the internal dynamics in the Republican Party, and we're actually going to get to some of that, but let's put A1 up on the screen. This is from Kyle Griffin, who said NBC News has confirmed Kevin McCarthy just punted plans to tee up a vote on the GOP's short-term spending plan later this week. Griffin says McCarthy is now left without a viable plan to fund the government with just 12 days left to avoid a shutdown.
It's rare that a post like that news will just make me laugh out loud.
You were just enjoying it.
Just the phrasing. I mean, it's terrible. It's going to suck for millions of people, probably including myself. Washington gets hit the hardest during a government shutdown, but just the framing of it is just he's right. Like he's left. The passive framing of it made me laugh too, because yes, he's left without a viable path. He does have a viable path. But it is to work with Democrats, and that's not necessarily viable for him because then they try to throw him out. But it's not viable to throw him out because they don't have a candidate to replace him. There's nothing viable anywhere.
Yes, for Democrats.
Yet the world must go on.
I was going to say, Matt Gaetz was offering Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to work with, or just Democrats in general, to work with him once again last week. A total troll move. But for Democrats, none of this works unless you throw the House into total chaos, which, again, like as a kind of anti-establishment person, I don't care about. Like, fine, throw the House into chaos. They're going to be doing dumb stuff either way. Whether the government's shut down or the government is running, it's dumb. Like, you're passing horrible legislation and not actually solving any problems. So does it bother me too much if they shut down the government for a little bit? No. Does it bother me too much if they don't shut down the government for a little bit? No, because either way, there's no substantive thing happening. And that's where I think the Kyle Griffin tone is reading Republicans wrong. He may not be reading Kevin McCarthy wrong, but Chip Roy, not all that bothered if the government shuts down. Matt Gaetz, not all that bothered if the government shuts down. And Mitch McConnell weighed in yesterday and said Republicans always get blamed for a shutdown, kind of warning Kevin McCarthy publicly, taking a shot at Kevin McCarthy publicly. Mitch McConnell is not wrong about that on a national level. He is, once again, totally wrong about that when it comes to representatives that comprise the House, who answer to smaller districts where voters are not just favorable to a shutdown, but are demanding a shutdown. They're calling constantly on these lines to the Capitol and saying, shut the damn government down. Don't send all of this money to BS purposes. And that's why, for instance, Chip Roy's hard line in the sand on that stopgap that was worked with was basically border security. He said, we need to have a border security. We need to have a return to pre-COVID spending. And this kicked off, the whole conversation got really, what's the right word for this, granular over differences, as it always does when a shutdown looms. But Matt Gaetz and Byron Donald started going back and forth.
Well, McConnell has this incredible line that he uses when it comes to a government shutdown, where he says there's no education in the second kick of a mule. And that's how he kind of avoided previous government shutdowns, because the first one, prompted by Ted Cruz back in 2013, which he did basically for email fundraising purposes.
And McConnell people hated it.
Hated it. It went terribly for them.
Republican voters liked it.
Some Republican voters.
Chip Roy was the chief of staff for Ted Cruz at the time.
That's a great poll. Yes. So right. So the arc from 2013 to today. That's right. You've got Chip Roy as Ted Cruz's chief of staff. Ted Cruz does this, basically forces a government shutdown. He really elevated his profile at the time. Creates a split between him and McConnell. But Roy, his chief of staff, clearly came out of that believing, oh, this was a win.
Absolutely.
This was the way to go. So now Roy is a member of the House of Representatives leading this effort here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Along with Matt Gaetz, who we have on the House floor yesterday. Let's roll Mr. Gaetz.
I'm not voting for a continuing resolution. I'm not voting to continue the failure and the waste and the corruption and the election interference, and in some cases, the efforts that could lead this country into World War III. I oppose the CR authored by my friend and colleague from Florida, Byron Donald. The Donald CR continues the Ukraine policy negotiated by Speaker Pelosi and Mitch McConnell in the omnibus that conservatives were against. The Donald CR is a permission slip for Jack Smith to continue his election interference as they are trying to gag the president, the former president of the United States and the leading contender for the Republican nomination. And the Donald CR abandons the principle that it is only a review of single subject spending bills that will save this country and allow us to tweeze through these programs and force these agencies to stand up and defend their budget. My friends, we are approaching the days where we're facing $2 trillion annual deficits atop a $33 trillion debt. This is unsustainable. And just to continue things with some facial 8% cut over 30 days that will lead to no programmatic reform is an insult to the principles we fought for in January.
So he's talking about Byron Donalds there. And Emily, am I hallucinating here, or did I not sit in the balcony in January and watch Matt Gaetz give speeches comparing Byron Donalds to Frederick Douglass
Yes,
when he was nominating him to be Speaker of the House? So, and now anyway, this is your party.
It's not my party.
You all figure this out. No, not Emily's party.
How dare you?
But it's her problem.
Yeah, yes. Well, so to the extent they consider themselves conservative, that's my problem. But Matt Gaetz is a master of theater, and Byron Donalds understands that. Now, reporters caught up with Byron Donalds, and C-SPAN cameras happened to capture his interaction with those reporters. He had a great response to Matt Gaetz. Check this out.
Your fellow Floridian Matt Gaetz is out here telling us he's working to develop a coalition to, quote, defeat the Donalds CR. What do you make of that?
I would challenge my colleague from Florida to create a coalition that tries to actually get a victory for the American people. If he wants to have a personal thing with me going back and forth, he's entitled to, but I don't care about that foolishness. I want to win.
Your colleagues who said they want to see...
Oh, and by the way, I'll leave it. I'll leave that for
No, come on.
No.
Okay, we wanted to play the clip basically because of the end there, which was so great. He was about to spill some tea clearly on Gaetz, and the reporter is like, please continue, sir. We have plenty of time. And he's like, you're not going to get me to go there.
And so people will understand what happened here. So Byron Donald sat down with basically moderate Republicans and other, House Freedom Caucus members.
Chip Roy,
and they hashed out a CR, a spending bill that they all could live with. And they're like, okay, let's put this on the floor. We know it's not going to pass the Senate. We know it's not going to be signed by Biden, but at least this puts us on record, gets us started in these negotiations. And Gaetz is like, no, not doing that. The Donalds CR.
This is a great quote from Chip Roy. And yesterday what the vote was procedural to allow the vote to continue. And so that vote, the vote to have the vote, basically to allow for the vote, was voted down. Chip Roy comes in and says, I find it extremely difficult to explain or defend opposition to an 8% cut over 30 days in exchange for the most conservative and strong border security measure we've ever passed out of this body. I think that is inexplicable. I think it's malpractice. And I think there are some outside groups who are trying to advance themselves that are a part of this, that are pushing this narrative that it's somehow malpractice to do that. So in a normal situation, it's very difficult for Republicans to fund the government and to have this negotiation between the Freedom Caucus, Main Street Caucus, Tuesday Group people. That's already hard enough. When you graft on the Trump-DeSantis dynamics to this, which is some of what you're seeing right now, it gets even more difficult. It was heading for a shutdown either way. Nobody wants a CR because it means you're kicking the can to December, and nothing is going to get solved in December. Nobody wants to have to solve these problems around Christmas. It's just a nightmare to try to do that. People are upset. It's even worse for public opinion. But the Chip Roy CR, to your point, Ryan, what Republicans want to do is say, we have given Democrats, the ball is in their court, and we've given them a great border security. If they really want to close the border, if they really don't want to shut down the government, we did it. And I think they probably still, there's some quotes here from other Republicans who are like, I think we'll just lock ourselves in a room and we'll figure it out. But when you have Matt Gaetz going after somebody like Byron Donalds, it makes it even less likely that they can sit down in a room and figure something out. I think they will. If I had a bet on it, I think Matt Gaetz has shown, like with the speaker vote, he'll go along with it. At the end of the day, he'll find something, realize at the last minute he can work with it. But man, we're not even talking about the Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene dynamics. Just a hell of a week for the Freedom Caucus.
And it's got to be interesting for somebody like Roy to be the kind of fire eater over, back in 2013 to now be kind of cast as some like compromising, kind of squish by people who are outflanking him, even though you're going to get a shutdown either way.
Yeah.
So what's the? I mean, I know we got to move on here, but I don't understand. Like, what? If you listen to kind of the Bannon wing of the Republican Party, they're celebrating people. Matt Rosendale was just on his podcast because he was one of the 5 against this. They're saying and they're saying that they went from 8 or 10 against the CR to maybe 24 because of the Bannon's posse haranguing people in the House. So what do they think is the move? Like, what are they going to get out of this?
I think it's the same thing.
I'm all for fighting. I'm just curious what's the plan?
Yeah, I think that it's the same thing with the speaker battle, where everybody knew it was going to end up being Kevin McCarthy, but they realized that they could push way further than people thought and get even more concessions after concessions after concessions. And you heard Gates actually even get in on the Ukraine spending in the clip that we played. I think they know they're eventually going to cave at the last minute, but they're going to look like they fought tooth and nail to get all of these extra concessions out of the establishment wing of the Republican Party in the process. So again, conclusion.
Will they get them, or will they just look like they're fighting? What's your guess?
McCarthy doesn't have a choice for the reason that you explained earlier in the segment, that it's either he's out the door and there's literally nobody who steps into that vacuum. Like, there's nobody that a handful of Democrats and a handful of Republicans would settle on. There's nobody Republicans can settle on other than McCarthy when you have such a slim margin. So it's McCarthy or bust, basically. And again, doesn't bother me too much, whatever happens there. But Kevin McCarthy is clearly the best bet for the Republican Party at this point, politically, substantively, in terms of actually bringing people together to do anything. And that's, their only option. And they know it. He knows it. So I think at the end of the day, it'll be very similar to the speaker battle. Push, push, push 20 times. And then at the last minute, okay, yep, here we go.
At least we get the theater.
It's good theater, so we'll stay on top of it, that's for sure.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.